speed combined with the amount creates pressure. And that pressure is felt by the player. So from that point of view, because the reed instruments have an obstruction, or they have like a stopper or a membrane that vibrates, we call those instruments pressure-based instruments, because a reed player is always going to gauge, depending on the quality of the reed, a reed player is always going to gauge how much amount to not let through so as to not create too much pressure so that they can actually play. So notice, like beginner clarinet players, they don't know about this. So when they blow with a lot of air, and you hear the air coming out of the side of their mouth, and they make really squeaky sounds. So now the flute, because of its open-ended nature, we're using the same two elements. So we're using speed and we're using amount, right? When you combine speed and amount, but you place an emphasis on the amount, that's when you get flow. And that's basically the gist of like the exercises that I was showing you. Now, if a flute player doesn't know this, and then they start to put extra emphasis on airspeed or tightening the embouchure, then you actually start to get pressure, which causes a lot of tension. Causes tension in the body, causes tension in the upper, in the all the muscles that surround the rib cage, and then one gets like a very small sound that doesn't feel particularly free or resonant. Okay, so now I'm gonna go on to another unfolding of these two principles. So in terms of musical terms, airspeed has to do with what in the sound? What does airspeed affect primarily?
Whether you're sharp or flat?
Yeah, pitch. So airspeed affects pitch directly. Airspeed indirectly also affects this other component that I'm going to mention. Now, amount of air affects what in the sound?
I would say dynamic.
Yes. So amount of air affects the dynamic range. So the more air you're able to put into the instrument, the louder you get. And the less air, then the softer you get. Now, as a flute player, when you can combine and when you can balance these two elements, when you can balance speed and amount in a way that you can move it seamlessly or easily throughout the registers, that's when you get resonance. So resonance is a component of this. Resonance is different than loudness, because you can have a loud sound, but that loud sound can be completely out of tune and not in keeping with what we aesthetically think of as a beautiful resonant sound. So typically, because we're dealing with the embouchure, if we tend to emphasize too much airspeed and we create too much pressure, then the dynamic range diminishes, and then we get pressure, and then it's just a little bit harder to play. So what I've noticed over the years, I've been doing this for like almost 20 years, a lot of research and a lot of teaching. And the main thing that I've noticed about this is that I think music music and flute playing should be enjoyed by all. And whether you're a beginner, whether you're an amateur, whether you're a professional, whether you're a virtuoso, it's about being able to really enjoy the music and to being able to like enjoy the sound and to be able to track those things that can keep you feeling like you're making progress. I'm sure that many of us have been in a situation where we feel like we practice our flute and we feel like we're going up against the wall. And it feels like really frustrating because it feels like there's no place to progress. Well, what I've noticed over the years, both in myself and in my students, is that when the student can make the shift and start to think about flow and start to think about amount, what I've noticed is that then the student definitely has trackable things at which they can work on, but while still enjoying the music and still enjoying their sound. And that to me is like the most important thing, because if we can stay focused on the enjoyment of the music and the enjoyment of the sound, it just leads to like a more positive attitude towards playing, a more positive attitude towards making music. And it's just great overall. So that is sort of my main passion with this, in that I want everybody to like really enjoy playing their flutes, whether they're a beginner or whether they're like an amazing virtuoso. There are players, so people don't talk about pressure bass or flow bass because it involves, like a deeper understanding of the science behind it. But there are definitely flow-based players out there, and they are flow-based, and they're just purely intuitive. That's how they play. So great examples of flow-based players, Lorna McGee from the Pittsburgh Symphony. Denis Buryakov is an amazing flow player.
Wow.
And so, and then, I mean, we go down the list, and there are many players, orchestral players, who are also flow-based, because being in the context of the orchestra, they've had to like come up with adjustments to their playing to be able to really make the instrument work. That doesn't always translate in terms of like the pedagogy. And that's why, I mean, I spent a lot of time researching and thinking about how to construct a technique whereby people feel like they can have tangible things to work on and be able to make progress. So, any questions from the video that I sent?
I just have a question. Who would you define as pressure-based players then?
Well, okay, so I wouldn't necessarily say that I wouldn't necessarily say that there is anybody out there who is entirely pressure-based, but I do think that there are certain elements of the technique that are definitely pressure-based. So I hear sometimes a lot of players who, up in the high register, they definitely resort to pressure in order to make the high register work. And I can also tell sometimes a pressure-based player based on how hard they have to work with intonation. Because we're talking about the science. I mean, we're talking about speed and amount, and speed being the element which tends to control pitch. So if you see a player that is having to embouchure everything in order to tune a piece of music, then there are elements of pressure bass happening there, because then there's that extra work of not taking into account that a flow-based situation would actually help them play phrases easier in tune.
Okay.
But generally, what I notice is that I think the majority of flute players, when it comes to the mid register, the mid register is awesome, because in the mid register, generally people feel that level of ease and responsiveness from the instrument. So in the mid register, a lot of people are actually intuitively already feeling the flow of the air and feeling the sound and feeling that vibration. But the problems occur when we go up into the high register and when we go into the low register. So in a pressure-based system, the low register suffers a lot, and then the high register suffers just from tension and the excessive pressure that sometimes people feel like they have to put to be able to make it work. And then generally, especially with younger players, the sound is thin and shrill, and so so in the video I outlined 4 techniques, and I think what I would like to do is going forward, I want to unfold each one of those, because I want to talk more about aiming, and I also want to talk more about posture and support, and how those things come together to make things feel easy and comfortable and confident and positive. So did any of you get a chance to try some of the exercises, the very simple exercise I was suggesting?
Just a little bit, a little bit.
Okay, so I'm curious, what did you guys notice?
Well, I had easier time in the middle register playing it, but when I was playing up higher, that's going to take some practice. I didn't. It was more pressure based up there.
Right. Okay.
So these techniques that you gave on your video would be the method to get the good sound in the mid register up to the upper register.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. So
that's going to require some work.
Yeah. It's not like hard work in terms of muscle engagement, but it's hard work in terms of coordinating. Mm-hmm. It's like, coordinating your posture, feeling the spine aligned, feeling the low abs and your core. Like it's also supporting your back. And then that when you move, you feel like the air is flowing. So the main thing, and the other thing that I wanted to sort of impress upon you, literally, if you just think about the word flow, and every time you pick up your flute, and you just have that word in mind, now you understand a little bit more about the science behind it, then ideas are going to start coming to you as well, because words are really important, and words are like the keys to unlocking meaning. And so thinking of the word flow already is a really great thing. So anybody else try the exercise? Comments on trying the little warm-up?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add something to what you had just said.
Yeah.
You said words are key to unlock meaning. And it just made me chuckle and giggle, because yesterday I just got a job of my dreams. I'm a reading specialist, and words are key to unlocking meaning. So yay. You definitely made a point there. I should have had that for my interview.
Okay.
Congratulations, Eve.
Yay.
Thank you so much. I'm Sunset Ridge Elementary, so I'm really excited.
Yay.
Great.
Sorry, guys. It just...
Yeah. And
I I did a little bit of the exercise, and I like that it followed that 5-note pattern, kind of like we're all used to from Tafel Gobert.
Yeah.
You know, it's like going up to that 5th, and then just, you know, our embouchure doesn't have to change a lot in that small range as well.
Right. So it's progressive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still not sure I understand like at all. So the exercise is a 5-note scale, and I'm just supposed to be thinking about flow. These are all exercises we've done before, and then you said think about posture, and you said to put my feet a certain way, and then you said think about aiming, but you didn't say where to aim. And just thinking about flow, like, okay, I'm thinking about the air going into the flute. This is a flow control mechanism. That's how the flute works. If you don't have flow here, the flute sound doesn't work. You
Right.
want a certain amount of flow. You want me to think about more flow or less flow. Like, I was incredibly impressed in the masterclass, like you said, when to think about more flow. And then the performance got way better, but you didn't do that with me. You were just like, now I'm playing 5 notes and I'm supposed to be thinking about flow. I want more.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. So just like in the masterclass, when I was working, I don't remember the name of the lady. She was playing the Sankan.
That was Lauren.
Lauren, yeah, Lauren. And you know, so what I did is I had her thinking about keeping the amount of air consistent based on going from the previous note to the next note. So in a 5-note exercise, when you're thinking about flow, you're not thinking necessarily about, oh, I got to put more air into the flute. No, not necessarily. No, it's more about keeping the consistency of the movement of the air from beginning note to the ending note without tightening the lips. Because, I mean, if you tighten the lips, then you get less air, you get more speed, less flow, and then that's when tension arises. So the object of the first exercise, so let me demonstrate. So let me see. In the first exercise, so this time I'm just gonna be focusing just on the flow of the air. So I'm not gonna necessarily do the other things that I suggested, right? Because that makes it a little bit more complex. But so initially, the idea is even without thinking about posture. So that already creates in me this idea that the air is like really flowing out of me. And so there's like a motion that feels generous. So normally we pick up a flute and then we tend to be extremely obsessed with the embouchure, and we tend to do, or one would tend to do, like trying to form the embouchure more for that 5-note pattern, but then it starts to get more tense. So I'll demonstrate again. So this is not about necessarily putting much more air, but keeping it consistent. I see a flute out there. Anybody want to try it?
Sure. Do you think connection is an equal term to flow?
Connection, yeah. Yeah, it's like a connectedness between the notes. Yeah.
The air is spinning through each one.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I'm also thinking of is that like just getting out of your head and trying to think about all the things that you're talking about, but rather than that, like just using your body, like thinking of the air and the energy coming from your body and kind of this whole idea of flow. When I was practicing, and that's what I was trying to kind of let go of all the details that you're talking about and just like allowing. And I found that like that really helps to stand in this stable, grounded position and just kind of allow. Yeah.
I'm glad you used that word because in master classes, that's one of the key words that I use. So it literally is to allow, like allow the air to move, allow the air to move, and trusting that even though we're going through an open space, that we're gonna be able to figure out the ways to be able to have mastery over that. Yeah. Okay. So that's the first exercise, is to just kind of like experiment with that allowance, trying a bunch of 5-note patterns, feeling the air flowing. And normally when I do that, I generally like get this really good feeling in the body because I feel like things have moved. And I'm able to expel the excess carbon dioxide from my lungs, and just it just feels good. It feels better. So okay, I'm gonna so the next part has to do with already starting to set up efficiency in that movement of the air. And so I talked about posture, and the spine is incredibly important because that's where the ribs are attached to. I mean, the spine is the core of the thoracic area. And so any kind of like compensation, whether right or left compensation of the spine, creates an imbalance that it just doesn't make the air as consistent as it could be. And so my wife and I, we both teach, and we talk about this all the time. And in trying to also solve her own problems, she was able to figure out like this brilliant thing, and I mentioned it in the video, that adapting sort of like the dancer's pose. What it does is that from the perspective of the pelvis, it helps to align the spine so that one is not necessarily leaning either too much right or left, but that it feels like you're centered. So when I get a chance to unfold that portion of it, I'm going to have my wife record a short little video, and I'll share it with you guys. Her explaining the whole thing with the posture. But okay, so second step would be, let's say you warm up and you feel that sense of allowance and you're already playing. So the next step is already sort of bringing a sense of balance in the body. And then beginning to notice the difference now. There's already a sense of power in the G that I did not have when I did not assume the posture. So if my feet are just sort of like anywhere, and I go to play, and I try to think of flow, it's hard to get that sense of power in the sound. But then as soon as I assume the posture, and I'll flip let me see if I can flip the video so you can see my feet. Can you see?
Mhm. Mhm.
So the alignment of the feet, remember, is more about the spine. It's not so much about the feet. It's about so. And then on another note about this, so as soon as we figured out the thing about the spine, about the feet and the posture, we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is like, because it like right away, it gave us a starting point that was really great. So then we started watching YouTube videos of all the flute players and seeing who stood like that. And can you believe Denis Boryakov, that's his stance?
Oh.
You pay attention to Denis, he stands in a V always and rarely deviates.
Mhm. Mhm.
So anyway, so so I invite you to try the exercise. Do you want to try it, Danielle? I see your flute out.
Sure, I can try it. Okay, so how do you want me to stand right now?
It's kind of like a dancer stance, and then it's your feet like a V,
Yep.
and then and just notice the alignment of your spine.
Board. Oh, that one.
Yeah, it feels nice and open.
It feels nice and open, right?
It feels like my spine is generally relaxed. It was really interesting when we had a Feldenkrais session with Niall O'Riordan. I think it was maybe him who was pointing out. I think it was him who was pointing out like how far down we're actually twisting from the spine, and how if we just focus on from the top, it's really. But like this way, it feels like it's a very like gentle, gradual twist. Yeah, I mean, it feels good. I feel stable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then what I notice about the feet though is that it helps to keep the torso aligned. I mean, the spine and the torso, even though we have this sort of asymmetrical instrument that we have to hold.
Mm-hmm.
And so
And we still
I think especially for teaching young people, it would be really beneficial to just setting up a posture that they can always rely on to get a good sound.
So are you saying that there shouldn't be a twist in the spine, or there is? I mean, because like the spine in general, like it's stacked. I feel like it's stacked on top. I mean, I don't feel like I'm like shifting to one side or anything like that. But I feel like there is a slight twist in the spine. Are you saying that should not be there?
Well, I'm gonna have I would like for you guys, and I'm gonna have my wife do the video because she believes that there should be minimal twist.
Okay.
And that
well, how do you get
okay, so let me put the video further.
Marco, one thing that you could ask her for me, I'm really interested to know this. Most, I would say, tend to have either a fairly centered aperture or a slightly off-centered to the left aperture.
That's a great question. Yeah.
And what I'm wondering about is for those of us who have offset to the right.
Yes, and my wife has an offset to the right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. So she's gonna get really excited to share with you. So okay, so if you you stand in posture, right, and you stand in the dancer's posture, and you bring the flute up, what you don't want to do is do a twist to set up your flute, but it's just a slight tilt in the head, which and then So notice I adjusted, I came this way, but then I adjusted a little bit to the right, but for the most part, the spine is not either way. See, if you do, when you're playing, if there's too much of a twist to the right, right? If there's too much of a twist to the right, then what happens is the muscles in the right start to overcompensate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, it's definitely to the left.
yeah, if you, for example, if you twist to the right, the muscles on the right in the back start to overcompensate, and then your air is not as consistent. So watch. If I go, literally my left side is almost like rendered less. But now if I do, so it's this idea of like maximizing allowance actually. So it's like you're fine tuning the allowance of the air to help you so I was thinking that maybe would you be okay if the next session we do a joint session with my wife and we talk about posture?
Yeah.
I think that'd be great.
Sure.
So I will ask her and I'll have her share with you, and then we'll put together a video on the whole thing with the posture, because there's also a lot of confusion as to like what to do with the arms. You know, like what to do with the arms and then the head and getting all that aligned and set up. Okay, so the next topic is, okay, so you start to allow the air and you start to like feel a sense of flow, right? But then you're having to traverse up to the high register, right? So aiming. So aiming is actually the way by which we can change the angle of the airstream so that the air speeds naturally in the head joint, in the front of the head joint, so that you get higher frequencies without collapsing the aperture. Does that make sense? So aiming is the way, so aiming, you do it with your jaw and a little bit with your lips, but primarily with the jaw. So it's keeping an understanding of your corners, the corners of the embouchure without losing your corners, and then just slightly coordinating now. So you set yourself up in a good posture. And then we're going to also talk about support, but aiming then. So remember I said that speed is the thing that is responsible for pitch. And so when you aim, you are just raising the airstream so that in the front of the head joint, the angle creates that shift. And so the air naturally speeds going in, but you don't collapse your aperture. So that's how you're able to, that's how you can get a really big resonant sound up in the high register, because you don't want to like try to get the high register by pushing harder and making the embouchure smaller, like a lot of us have been taught in the beginning, you know, and so that just makes a small, really high pitched sound. And so that's why, notice that it's almost like when I start to aim, it's like immediately the awareness of pitch like really kicks in. Because then, but when I get to the D, when I get to the higher note, I haven't collapsed my aperture. And so I still get a bigger sound. I still get a balanced sound. And so this applies even in the very high register. So you can get a big resonant sound up in the high register without, and a sound that you can tune as well.
So what are you, where are you aiming differently on those notes? Can you describe it?
Okay, so
Karen's stuff.
there are
Yeah.
three basic aim setups. There's the basic aim for the low register, which is.
Is there anything else that goes to Goodwill?
You could probably.
Maybe the restaurant because the weather's starting to turn.
It's getting a little windy.
Where you're aiming down, right? Now. The first shift in the aims happens into the mid register on the D, right? So that's the first. Now, from here, it goes up until about high A, high AB. That's sort of the next shift, A, around A and B. And then from there, then there is like micro movements upwards, because obviously in the high register, the distances are closer. So the movements up in the high register actually have more to do with maintaining your aim that you get to the high B. And then for sharp notes like high E and F sharp, it's more about giving a little bit more aperture. So for example, then if I go so there, I'm keeping the same aim as the D. And I'm just giving a little bit more aperture. And then high E and F sharp, I can keep them more controlled without tension. So it's a different kind of training, because it's more like, it's like, how should I say? It's not like exertion training, but it's more like yoga training. It's like maintaining a pose, you know, it's like being able to maintain a pose and have it be like really flowing So this is one of the other topics that I would like to cover. And then the final topic, which is the idea of support, is complex because the whole upper body plays a role, and support is like having to do more with like real awareness of your body and just being comfortable with that awareness, which definitely helps in maintaining consistency in the playing. I always tell my students that when I practice the air. So I literally, I get phrases, passages, sections, and I'm just like practicing how I'm using the air in sections of music. And then that tells my body what to do. Like then I know, like, okay, I need to use this much air. I need to stay focused here. I need to, it's like, they're definitely trackable things that can help you, play with consistency. So any questions?
Yes, I have two actually.
Yeah.
I recently downloaded a tonal app for my phone, and I discovered that when I play with it, I've always had a problem working with pitch, and I'm very conscious of it. And when I play each note very carefully and I watch my tuner, I'm all over the place. So I'm really working at trying to center my sound and getting a better sound. And obviously what you're talking about, the flow, and may help me to stay in that. Is it just through practice that you get to stay in that zone all the time? Because as I'm playing, I'm obviously like going out of whack all over the place, and I don't want to be out of whack. Is it just practice? That's my first question. And the second question is, you talked about standing, but many times, like when we're in flute rehearsal, or if you're in a performance situation, and everybody's sitting and turning to the side because of the massive amount of instruments that you're using, all your practice is going to go down the tubes when you turn. But I discover also when I sit and practice, it hurts my ribs. And I'd prefer to stand up and play. Even at rehearsal, I would prefer to stand up and play than to sit because it hurts my ribs. Is there a better way to sit and play? Is it just a matter of maintaining the posture as best you can and stay front as best you can?
Yeah, I'm gonna have my wife cover that topic
Okay.
with you, because
you.
that's something that we have to deal with. And there's definitely ways of setting yourself up in a way that you can sit and keep the alignment of your spine, and not overemphasize one side versus the other. So we'll definitely cover that.
Okay, thanks.
In terms of pitch, though, I think it's better to train with your ear. So playing 5-note patterns against the drone, it's actually more recommended, because then it's like you're developing that awareness between what you're sensing with your ears as you play, and being able to respond. Okay. So a lot of times when players don't know, like young players especially, they don't know, and they're in a rehearsal and they're playing in a band, and they're sharp or flat, and then because they don't know, they try to tune by rolling in and out, or like rolling inward with the flute, or like lipping out. But you can actually really tune like with mastery, using the amount of air. So actually, in fact, using flow as the way by which you tune. So if I'm aiming right, and my aperture is not collapsed, notice the range. I can play a nice sound that is on the sharper side. Or and you still retain flexibility because you're not tightening the lips. And so let me tell you, if you do the exercises, the 5-note patterns, and you start to put your ear towards playing it in tune and beginning to understand aiming, that already is going to bring a high level of awareness in terms of how you respond. Because then you're going to start notice where things are. The problem, and I will say this, and sometimes, mostly with like college age players, like sometimes when I hear recordings of like college age players and they still don't have enough experience and their technique is a little bit pressure based, the thing that is most disconcerting is that there is no tonal center. In other words, I hear within a phrase, I hear some notes that are flat and some notes that are sharp, and it doesn't make sense to me. Because it's like, okay, well, where's the tonal center? Like they play a phrase and some notes will be flat and some notes are sharp, and that's because the embouchure is compromised, maybe the chest is compromised, there's tension and all of those things, which is not allowing for consistency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for explaining that. It's interesting.
Next time you listen to any of the videos of Lorna McGee and listen to Dennis, listen for their intonation. It's just like really spot on.
Thank you.
It's really spot on, yeah. So, well, I hope this was helpful. And then I'll talk with my wife, and then we'll start getting a video put together. And then hopefully we'll send it over sometime this next week.
That sounds great. Yeah. So it sounds like what we should all be working on between now and then is just the posture suggestions that you gave us, and just this idea of consistent air from note to note, and have our drones out.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually just enjoy your sounds. Like really like do this with the idea that you like really want to love your sound and enjoy like your playing. So
thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good weekend, everyone. And we'll be in touch about when Marco's next class is going to be with Anna.
All right.
See you later.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Enjoy your Saturday.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.